because I was reading about something called logotherapy, where it talks about being actually cognizant of now, because usually we worry about the future, we worry about the past, and we live in those times instead of just living in now, you know. And that's what causes most of our stresses, because you can't control what happened in the past, and you definitely can't control what happened in the future.
If you could mobilize a group of people, what movement would you mobilize and why?
I would call my movement the mindful movement. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death between people aged 15 and 29. 1 in 3 people are expected to suffer from mental illnesses in their lifetime. So I believe that mobilizing people to strive for mental health would actually fix so many social ills in our society. And that is what I would mobilize.
Okay, finally, hi everyone. Happy Monday, it's Mindful Mondays, and today we're in partnership with Discovery Vitality, South Africa, of course, and the South Africa organization, and FADIC. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be talking about everything mental well-being related, and now we're in conversation with Vitality. I'm so excited. So today we're going to be talking about what is mental well-being, why is it important, COVID-19 and mental well-being, the role of physical activity, nutrition, sleep and mindfulness, and a range of other things. And today I will be joined by Dr. Seranne, who is a clinical wellness specialist at Discovery Vitality. She focuses on mental well-being. She received her medical degree at WITS and has also completed her diploma in mental health. And in 2018, she graduated from Harvard University with a master's in public health. So we're in good company tonight, guys. We're really in good company. And I hope you guys are excited. And I think this conversation is quite important, especially going into the Easter weekend, and finding ways to just be mindful and take care of our mental well-being. So let me see if I can get on. There we go. Hello everyone, I see so many people joining in. Hi Dr. Seranne.
Hi Judu, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks, and how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really, really excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, me too. And I just think this platform is so great, and what you're doing here, this initiative is really, really awesome. So yeah, I'm happy to be a part of it, and thanks again.
No, that's an absolute pleasure. I think it's such a good partnership to have and a good conversation to have, especially with a brand like yours that actually advocates for mental well-being. And I think it's quite an important conversation, especially during this time of COVID-19, and now going into the long weekend. People can use some of the tips that we're going to be discussing today to just see where they can help themselves as well. Because I do advocate for self-help tips, because not everyone has access to such information. So thank you so much for joining us today. I think this conversation is very important. As someone that struggled with her mental health, I found that things that we do within our own homes actually go a long way. Yes, it's quite important to see psychologists and psychiatrists, but it's quite important too to actually have a balanced and healthy lifestyle. I've seen how just going to the gym does a lot for me. Eating well does a lot for me. There was actually a time where I became vegetarian, and it was such a good time, and it helped change my perspective on a lot of things. I'm not saying people must go vegetarian, but I'm just saying the importance of a good diet and taking care of yourself and your well-being is quite important. And I would like to talk to you further about that. So I just wanted to find out first, for people that don't know, what is mental well-being and how is it different from mental health?
Yeah, that's a great place to start, because I think what we'll be focusing on for our chat is more on the mental well-being or mental health side of things. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, that gets a little confusing when we talk about sort of mental well-being and mental illness, and there's a few words that get thrown around in the space, and sometimes it's a little bit hard to see what we're talking about. Mm. So maybe to start with, mental health or mental well-being is quite different from mental illness, which is sort of the biological mental disorders or conditions. A good reference point for me, which I often use, is the WHO's definition of mental health. And they define it as a state of well-being, which an individual realizes his or her own capabilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So as you can see, the definition is actually quite encompassing. It's quite broad. It's about, I guess, functioning in society as an individual and as a member of society and community. And why it's important to make this distinction and why it's important to talk about mental health or mental well-being is because, historically there's been a lot of developments in the field of therapeutic psychology and psychiatry, which has sought to address mental disorders and mental conditions, which is really important, and I'm so glad that so much progress has been made there. But, relatively less work has been done to address maybe, the positive, that's improving happiness or enhancing your mental well-being, the links between, physical health and the societal aspects that plays in our role, in mental well-being. But the good news is in the last few decades, there's been a lot more research in this space and a lot more work has been done to address the shortcoming, and we've learned a lot there, like in terms of what we can do to enhance our mental well-being.
And why do you think people should care about their mental well-being, and why do you think of it as being an important building muscle or cardiac fitness in the gym, or is it eating healthy?
Yeah, so it's an integral part of us, right? Our mental health, our emotional health is a vital part of life. It impacts our thoughts, our behaviors, our emotions, who we are. Being healthy emotionally can promote our productivity. It can help us be more effective in, work, school, in our personal lives. It can, it's so integral to who we are as our physical health and who we are as human. Generally, mental well-being can encompass a lot, including things like, feeling good about ourselves, being able to function well individually or in our relationships, being better able to deal with the ups and downs of life, building resilience to stress, for example, feeling more connected socially and to our surroundings, feeling like we have more control of our lives, and also, building a sense of purpose and meaning. So mental well-being really, it's essential to our lives, to our overall health. It's absolutely critical that we don't neglect it because, it's who we are, really.
And I think it's quite important that you say that, because we often neglect our mental well-being and prioritize maybe the physical side, but then I've noticed that both of them are interlinked. You need your mental well-being to be in a good place in order for everything to function optimally. And I wanted to find out, what does the science on mental health or well-being tell us? What do we know about people's sense of mental well-being in South Africa and globally?
Yeah, so what we know is a little worrying. So we know that mental health is a significant challenge in South Africa and in the world and globally. We're learning more and about just how big that challenge is. So for example, we know that globally 13% of the burden of disease is accounted for by mental health illness. In South Africa, we know approximately 1 in 6 people suffer from a mental illness, and that's incredibly high. From our vitality data, so what we see is that we generally see around 5% of people self-report some level of mental distress, mental well-being distress. However, what we also see in our vitality data, which is quite promising, is we see a relationship between physical activity and improved mental well-being. So what we see is that those people who engage more with healthy habits, such as physical activity and good nutrition, tend to also report less psychological distress. For example, from our data, we saw an association that showed that physical inactivity was associated 4 times more reported psychological distress compared to those who actively engage in exercise. So we see that sort of protective effect of physical activity, which is really interesting to see. We also see associations between higher levels of physical activity as well as higher levels of reported psychological resilience. So in other words, what that means is people who tend to do more physical activity also tend to report higher levels of resilience and that ability to sort of combat stress and be able to bounce back from adversity. So what we see is really promising signs from things like physical activity, nutrition, mindfulness and sleep in ability to sort of enhance your mental health, mental well-being, but also potentially to prevent certain mental health conditions, which is good news.
And I'm very happy that you brought in the element of sleep, because I don't think a lot of us prioritize that for our mental well-being. I remember, especially students, you find that we run on empty, so we don't sleep at all, and then we wonder why we feel like we're about to burn out. I think sleep is one thing that's often neglected. In terms of our mental well-being, because we just think, okay, if we are running 10 Ks an hour, not even sleeping, we think that's okay. But what other factors other than sleep, a lack of sleep, erodes our mental well-being?
Yeah, and I mean, we can chat more about sleep, and I'll definitely get to that, because I think it's such an important topic, and especially in our world with digital screens and with 24-hour sort of social media and news and all sorts of things. I think sleep often takes a backseat, and yeah, we definitely get more into that. But yeah, I mean, and in terms of eroding our mental well-being, unfortunately, there is quite a bit that can erode our mental well-being. So, we have this high prevalence of mental health conditions, and we know that burden is high. What we also know is that there are a lot of external factors, a lot of factors that might not be in our control that can have an effect on our mental well-being. Those are things that can include, 2020, COVID-19, going through a pandemic, but also things like financial stress, social conflicts. All of those kind of elements can really have an effect on our mental health and our mental well-being, and oftentimes it can feel like it's out of our control. However, there are other factors that are within our control that can also contribute to eroding our mental health, and that's why it's important that the ability to manage our thoughts, our behaviors, or interactions, or to learn more about how our thoughts, our behaviors, and interactions interact with each other and interact with the environment is really important, because those are the things that are in our control, and those are the things that we can work on and sort of manage and sort of use to help cope with some of these external stresses that maybe happen with or without us. It's important to be cognizant. It's important to be cognizant of the factors that exist externally and exist internally. And the goal is that if we can improve our mental well-being, hopefully we can begin to cope better with both the external factors, but also the internal stresses as well. And that's kind of the goal of taking care of our mental health, nurturing our mental health, because it's important. If we can try and nurture things we're in control of, it can help us in the long term, hopefully cope better generally.
But how do we become cognizant of the external and internal factors? Because I think most of the time we never know when we're going wrong, or we're not doing something that is good for our mental well-being. So how do we get to a point where we can become cognizant of it?
Yeah, it's a great point, right? So the first thing, and I'll always advocate this, and I think as a doctor, for my training, it's always so important. But the first thing is awareness, and it's through platforms like the platform you're hosting now, but also resources that are available to people, that we start to learn a little bit more about our thinking processes, what we're going through, whether what we're going through can be expected, can be normal, whether we need to seek extra help. And so the first step really is awareness. Learning more about mental health as a topic, learning more about mental well-being. At Vitality, for example, we have the Vitality at Home webpage. It's a free resource. It's available to absolutely everyone. On there, you can find resources, articles, videos, links that go through all of these sort of topics in more detail and what you can do, including, interactive sort of videos that you can follow along and see it helps you. But I mean, SADAG has more resources, your page, what you're doing here. There's a lot of information there, and I think it's important to sort of get that information, read about it, learn about it, because sometimes, as to your point, Shudhu, sometimes stress sits on us, or we're going through things, but we just think it's run of the mill. Maybe we're not sleeping so well, maybe we're not eating so well, maybe things are changing, but you don't sort of pay attention to it because there's so much going on, and you don't actually realize that, hey, maybe that's not okay, and also maybe there is actually help that's available there for me. There are actually things that I can do, and it's important to sort of focus on those things and maybe get more assistance where needed. The second thing that I would say is screening. So what screening is essentially, speaking to a healthcare professional, or for Vitality members, accessing the mental well-being assessments that is available for all Vitality members, or even, calling SADAG and getting extra support. And here with screening, it's really what happens is you either do a questionnaire or you talk to a healthcare professional, and what they'll do is they'll assess, your risk for mental health conditions, or what you're going through at the moment, and they can also provide sort of more personalized advice. And that's a really important tool, because again, sometimes it's hard to know. Hey, maybe what I'm going through now is I'm struggling a little bit, but it's something that you don't sort of realize that you just carry on with your day-to-day activities. And then the last thing that I think we can talk a little bit more on is so definitely seeking that extra help, but just generally in terms of day-to-day activities, what we can do. And I know sometimes it sounds like, oh, I've heard this before, but really if we invest in this long-term, we really see the long-term benefits. And those are things like regular physical activity, healthy nutrition, and we can go through more details of that. Sleeping, getting the right amount of sleep, as much as possible, because our brain really needs that. Mindfulness, which can have such good effect in combating stress, and sometimes we don't even know how much stress we're under. But all of those sort of activities have been associated with protective or even preventative effects for mental health conditions. So really it's important to kind of keep doing them. Even if you do it once and you're like, oh, I don't feel better, it's about kind of investing in them and continually doing them, and that's where we see like the long-term benefits. So it's really important to keep up those activities on a regular and consistent basis, even sometimes where you feel like, oh, I can't do it, I don't have the time, or whatever it is. It's so important both to our physical and our mental health.
I think it's like quite important to create habits. Because it took a long time to build the habits that we have. So for someone who does not sleep, for example, to create the new habit of sleeping is something else. For you to get into a new, I don't like calling it a diet, but getting into a new lifestyle where you eat healthier, where you go to gym. In the beginning, it's always going to be a little difficult, but eventually it does get better. Like it really does get better. And I think one thing that we also need to just advocate for is for people to be kind to themselves. In the beginning, you're not going to move from not doing anything to be completely like super fit or eating super clean without any cheat days or whatever else. So it's quite important for you. In the beginning, it's going to be difficult, but you can build that habit. But it needs a lot of self-kindness and a lot of self-love. I just wanted to know how. Pardon?
Sorry, I just wanted to add to that point, because I think it's such a crucial point. I think sometimes what ends up happening is we set this massive goal, and it's hard to attain, and you think you're going to do something, and on day one or day two you haven't been able to attain it, and then you sort of just give up because you haven't attained that massive goal. And I think what we find is that setting small, regular, consistent goals that are more achievable, that you can sustain, that's a lot more valuable, right? And that's, in Vitality, we do that through like reward programs and incentivizing sort of that consistent kind of activities and whatnot. But really it's about, tomorrow, maybe I'll cut out this one thing, or maybe I'll add this one vegetable to my diet, whatever it is, or tomorrow maybe I'll do 5 minutes of activity, but you know that you're building up and you're slowly getting there, and it's okay. It's okay if one day you miss it, or one day it's okay. It's more the journey that's important, not really the destination. And it's as you're so right, it's so important to be kind to yourself as well. Trying is the first step, and if you've managed to do that, you've done great. Just keeping that up in a sustainable way. Yeah.
Because I remember for me, when I decided to start like being healthier, it was just, for me, my personal choice was to cut down on sugar. stop drinking fizzy drinks when it wasn't good for me, because I could see how I struggle to sleep as it is. So things like that. So just being cognizant again of the things that I struggle with and how to help better that. So it's just literally about being kind to yourself, because sometimes we set really unrealistic goals for ourselves, like today, by tomorrow I'm going to be as fit as Serena Williams, but then you have to start somewhere. They all started somewhere. So please guys, remember to be kind to yourself, remember to set realistic goals, and remember it's one day at a time. Like she was saying, like Dr. Seranne was saying, it's not about the destination, it's literally about the journey to get to your best mental well-being and physical well-being. I just wanted to ask you though, what can we look at in terms of supporting our mental well-being, and can you take me through some key lifestyle habits that we all need to have in place for optimum mental health?
Yeah. So maybe I can tell you. So we mentioned a few of these things, right? So we talked a little bit about like physical activity and nutrition, and we can go into more details as to what that looks like on a granular level. But maybe what I can use here, so just to build up what I was saying previously, so what's important is awareness, screening and prevention, seeking out help through there's many avenues, and we can chat a little bit about that if you're not coping and you're not managing, but then also those regular day activities like physical activity, eating healthy, and maybe I can go into a little bit more detail, or maybe I can use the vitality as an example as to how we sort of structure it, because I think that's a good way to structure it generally. So generally, the primary aim of vitality of the mental well-being program is to offer like a series of interventions which can assist members improve their sense of well-being, reduce those feelings of mental stress and distress, and the interventions generally are quite varied, they have wide appeal, and they are all evidence-based. So how we do it, as to build from the previous kind of discussion, where we start is screening assessments, right? So these are they're online questionnaires, and the idea here is to help support individuals who may be experiencing or who are at risk of emotional distress, and to ensure that they have access to further counseling should they need it. The other kind of elements are we promote sort of mental well-being with a specific focus on enhancing mindfulness, improving the amount and quality of sleep, improving physical and cardiovascular health. So that's by increasing physical activity, also introducing sort of mind-body activities, as well as promoting healthy eating. We also just recently are just really excited to announce that we introduced a mental well-being goal on top of our mental well-being investments in Vitality. And that goal, basically it encourages members to track their sleep and their mindfulness sessions, and they're rewarded for them with Discovery Miles for achieving your mental well-being goals. And then just to re-emphasize, there are a number of resources available to all South Africans on the Vitality at Home pages. This includes mental well-being articles, podcasts, meditation videos, as well as home workout videos, nutritious recipes. So it's really all-encompassing. So I really encourage everyone to go to the Vitality at Home page, explore it, because there's just so many resources, so many good articles where you can read more information. It's really, really useful.
And I know that Vitality is known for getting you physically active and also eating healthy. Can you please tell me a bit more about your mental well-being program?
Yeah, so the mental well-being program was launched last year. We started with mental well-being assessments. The idea here is how can we, provide, that knowledge base so people can learn more about their mental health. And I mean, we've talked about this a little bit more. I think the first step to any sort of mental well-being program, any mental well-being initiative, is to learn more, to actually understand more. So that's what the focus was. We have assessments that include assessment for depression, anxiety, stress, resilience, personal well-being, as well as alcohol use. And here, the main aim is people can go through the questionnaires, can learn a little bit more about these different kind of conditions and the screening, and can find out more details, about that. And then from there, see if, maybe they need extra support and counseling, and that's sort of provided, that information is provided to them. And then we built on that by now having the mental well-being goal or module. So once you complete your assessments, which you should complete a minimum of 2 times a year, and you get awarded points for completing them, regardless of your results, it's just for completion and going through it and learning more about your mental health. Then you can activate your mental well-being goal and your mental well-being module, which focuses on sleep and mindfulness. So if you track and report at least 4 nights of 7 hours of sleep per week, or at least 3 10-minute mindfulness sessions per week, you can get awarded every week with Discovery Miles. So it's a really cool initiative. We're really trying to promote healthy sleeping, engaging in mindfulness, learning more about your mental health. And then, this is for Vitality members, but generally, again, to emphasize, if you can go to the My Vitality at Home webpage, you can find out a lot more detail, but a lot more resources that are available to everyone.
And I know you touched earlier on the difference between mental well-being and mental health. And I'm sure a lot of people here they still find it a bit confusing. So how do you figure out what you're going through? How do you know if what you're struggling with is your mental health or your mental well-being?
Yeah, so knowing your health is the most important thing. And I think to your point, 2020, 2021 has been a really confusing, overwhelming, stressful time for so many people. We've had to go through so much, and we still are going through so much. And I think a lot of the time, it can really take a toll on not only our physical health, but our mental health as well. So I do acknowledge that probably a lot of us are going through difficulties at the moment and are struggling at the moment. Just to emphasize, the first pillar of Vitality is know your health. And that is just so important. Read more about it. Engage in sessions like this. If you're in Vitality, do your mental well-being assessments, because all of that really, it kind of just gives you more information about mental health and mental well-being in general. As mentioned earlier, a lot of the time, mental ill health can appear in a very insidious way. You don't even really notice it. You just sort of know you're not sleeping as well as you were sleeping, or you're not, eating as well as you were eating, or you're not, engaging in activities that you usually would have engaged in, or you're not socially as active as you were before, and you don't really notice it because it comes in slowly, and you just think it's other things, but sometimes, it's a little bit more, and sometimes we're actually struggling and we don't know that maybe, hey, that's not me, actually, that's something else, and maybe I can get support for it. And it's important to reach out, to talk to people you trust, talk to people, healthcare professionals and counselors. Oftentimes in our work, in our school, in our universities, even SADAG, there are sort of resources, Vitality at Home, that are available to us, but we don't know about them. Actually learning about it, talking about it, talking to people you trust. And and what I find oftentimes often when I bring up maybe something I'm struggling with, a lot of people empathize with me, and you realize a lot more people are going through what you're going through, and you can often seek help together or leverage off each other as well. So it's really important to look out for those resources, and to just kind of take stock of where you're at and whether you're feeling okay. And sometimes that's as simply as pausing at some point in a day, whenever you can, and just sort of like, hey, okay, am I doing okay? Am I coping? Am I all right? And sometimes it's just something as simple as that.
And our guest last week was talking about how just breathing exercises help a lot. There's some days where life is like literally like moving so fast that you just need to take a minute and just take a pause and just figure out how you're doing. And I think that has a lot to do with mindfulness, which is something that you've actually been speaking about a lot tonight. Do you mind expanding a bit on the mindfulness and what role does it play in our mental well-being?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's exactly it. Maybe before I get to mindfulness, just a little bit on stress, because I think where mindfulness plays a big role is combating that sort of day-to-day stress that we all kind of experience, but a lot of the time we don't realize we're experiencing it. It's insidious, it's deadlines or it's world stress or financial stress or whatever, school stress, whatever it is, sits on us, and it can play a role on, on how we feel physically and how we feel mentally as well. What ends up happening a lot of the time when you're stressed is you're either thinking about the past or the future.
Yeah.
So you're thinking about what happened, what did I say, what did I do? Or you're thinking about, what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen next week, I have to do this project or this deadline, whatever it is. So we go through the cycle of thinking what happened and what's going to happen, but we hardly ever take time to think about right now, this moment, what's happening in the present. And that's what mindfulness is there to address. So really the goal of mindfulness is to maintain awareness in this moment. So it's to sort of disengage from any attachments or thoughts or emotions, and to sort of just exist in this moment and just sort of focus on the now, focus on the breath, for example, a lot of the time. And really the goal of meditation or mindfulness is about becoming aware and mindful of your current thoughts, your feelings, and your sensations that are happening in this space. As mentioned, so much of our stress is thinking about the past or the future. Mindfulness is about refocusing on the present, like what's in our control right now. And sometimes it's really, my breath is just in my control right now. And that's okay. It's designed, mindfulness, especially cognitive-based mindfulness, which is a lot of the mindfulness programs, they're based and they're designed to combat that stress response, which I was chatting about, which is that fight or flight response that our bodies might be in. And we aren't even really aware of it. The good thing about mindfulness is that there's been quite a bit of research done in this space, especially, as mentioned, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, which that sounds like a fancy term, but it's generally the mindfulness we engage in, the breathwork activities and the muscle relaxation. So that sort of mindfulness has been shown in research to reduce depression relapse, for example. There's also papers that show that mindfulness programs help to reduce psychological stress and all the dimensions associated with stress. And it's also been shown that mindfulness can improve the anxiety, depression, and chronic pain. So there is a lot of sort of research backing mindfulness. How do you do it? So how do you get started? Because it sounds great, but what do you do? Right? So here again, what I can say is I recommend, so we have partner apps in Vitality. The apps are Headspace, Calm, Shudufhadzo, as well as the Mindfulness app. There's a great place to start. You can have a look at those apps. There's a lot of resources that are available. There are a lot of trials and things like that, which can really be a great place to start. The other place you can look at, as mentioned before, is Vitality at Home. There you'll find breathwork videos and sort of other meditation videos. And then maybe I can just talk about two examples, because you can even start it just like this. But there's two types of mindfulness that I can speak of in terms of examples. The one that I'll start with is focused and controlled breathing. So you mentioned you had a previous guest who talked just about breathwork, for example. So one of the techniques that you can try is something called block breathing. And obviously you don't want to do any of these sort of techniques, and you don't want to run out of breath or anything like that. So please do it safely. But the idea here is you would inhale for 3 seconds, hold your breath for 3 seconds, exhale for 3 seconds, and then hold your breath for 3 seconds, and then repeat. So you just do that. Do it 3 times over. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold, inhale. And you do that 3 times over, and it feels so good. It does. It really does. It's just a slight pause, a slight sort of time out for the day. You're just focusing on your breath, allowing yourself, a minute or two to just not worry about things for a second. Those worries will still be there. You'll get to them eventually, but for now, you're just focusing and sort of relaxing. The second one that I can chat about is progressive muscle relaxation. So this one is a little bit better when you're doing a guided meditation and through the resources that I mentioned. Here, what you essentially do is you focus on different parts of your body. So you can start with your toes and work your way all the way up. And the idea is you progressively relax the muscles as you go up. So, you relax your toes, you relax your ankle, you relax your calves, you relax your thighs. And the idea is, again, you're kind of forcing your mind to focus on this moment, on these muscles, and not to wonder so much. The other kind of goal about mindfulness is your mind will wander. It always does.
Yeah.
It will think, will go out, and that's really okay. The idea is just notice it and then bring it back to your breath and to if it's the muscle relaxation. Those are just some sort of like my little tips, but honestly, if you check out the resources, you'll find a lot more information. It really can help you get started in the process of mindfulness.
So I think from what I've gathered, like mindfulness is just about being present in the present moment, if that even makes sense. But like being present, because I think that's what the breath work does, and actually just noticing different parts of your body, even like the toes, like you're saying. It forces us to be present in the moment that we're in. Because I was reading about something called logotherapy, where it talks about being actually cognizant of now, because usually we worry about the future, we worry about the past, and we live in those times instead of just living in now, and that's what causes most of our stresses, because you can't control what happened in the past, and you definitely can't control what happened in the future. So especially the breathing work, it helps just to bring you back to the present, to bring you back to now. So I'm really happy, really happy about those self-help tips, because I'm definitely going to use them. But something else that you actually mentioned earlier that we actually briefly spoke about was sleep. I know a lot of people talk about beauty sleep, getting 7 to 8 hours a day, but what is the importance of good quality sleep on your mental well-being?
Sleep. The importance of sleep has received considerable attention in medical literature, and I think in the popular media, especially in more recent years, and rightfully so, because research is really starting to tell us how important sleep is and how many functions are attributed to sleep. And I think, as mentioned earlier, the reason why sleep is also so important now is because I think our environment has changed so much. We're in such a digital environment, we're in such a virtual environment a lot of the time. We have 24-hour access to TV shows and series and emails and social media and instant messaging, and we almost have no incentive to sleep. We almost have all the incentive to stay awake, and that can be really, really damaging, because what we know is that sleep is so integral to our physical health, but also our brain health. What also we know is, and it's quite disturbing, is that research suggests that almost at least 1 in 3 adults find it difficult to fall asleep or to stay asleep. So we know it's a significant problem. A lot of people struggle with sleep problems. And maybe before I get into like the actual tips of just the day-to-day tips of what we can do for sleep, just to emphasize that if you are having significant sleep problems and if it is affecting your functionality, it's really important to seek help and to get help, and to try and sort of just get extra assistance when it comes to sleep. For adults, it's recommended that we get at least 7 hours of sleep per night. That's every night. And inadequate sleep, so we're not getting enough sleep, it can result in a lot of problems. I mean, the most obvious of which is sleepiness during the day, which can be quite risky, especially, if we're driving or if we're in public, or even if we're just trying to do work. The sleepiness never helps. But related to general sleep difficulties and not getting enough sleep, we also see that it's associated with cognitive problems, and that's basically like our ability to think or to reason. It can also cause problems with working memory. So, that's just whether we can remember things short-term or long-term. As well as holding attention and concentration. So if you're not getting enough sleep, it can affect sort of all of those kind of attributes, I guess, of our cognition. We also see that research has shown that inadequate sleep can affect our physical health. So it's also associated with conditions such as obesity, hypertension, heart disease, and even overall mortality, which is really scary. So what can you do? So the first thing is, if you're struggling to sleep and you have a sleep problem and it's really difficult, it's important that you try and get professional help. But generally, what we should do is we should all try to practice good sleep hygiene. You probably heard this term, sleep hygiene. And what that really means, I know it's confusing because it has the word hygiene, but what it really means is good sleep habits. So what are some of those habits? Those are things like setting and keeping strict bedtimes and awake times. So if your bedtime is 10 o'clock every night, trying to stick to that 10 o'clock. If your awake time is 5 a.m., trying to stick to that 5 a.m. every day, like just trying. Even if your sleep wasn't that good that night, if you stick to it, you create that routine, and our bodies often respond well to routine. The other thing is to avoid tea, coffee, caffeine. in the few hours before bedtime. So you don't want to have these sort of more stimulating kind of drinks right close to your bedtime. You also want to avoid screens. So that includes TVs, phones, PCs, tablets, for at least 1 hour before bed. It's a lot of people talk about going into this ritual of relaxation kind of before bed, whether that's like, having a shower, going to downtime, maybe reading a little bit, but, just kind of avoiding screens. The other sort of things we can do is to avoid excessive naps during the day. That can really affect our nighttime sleepiness. Being physically active during the day. So again, physical activity is just kind of, it's so important. And then, practicing mindfulness and relaxation techniques. Those, especially before bed or even as you're trying to fall asleep, it can really help sort of just focus again on the now, because oftentimes I think sometimes it can be difficult to sleep if you're thinking about tomorrow or yesterday. Again, this is where mindfulness and relaxation can really have benefits to our sleep.
I'm definitely learning something here tonight, because everything that you mentioned about good sleeping tips, I have not done that. I had caffeine before I slept last night. I was watching series until midnight and I struggled. I really struggled to sleep, which actually makes so much sense, because I really struggled to sleep until 3 a.m. So I really need to start creating the habit of actually sleeping at a specific time, waking up at a specific time. And you're right, it goes a long way. But one other thing that we had spoken about earlier was physical activity and nutrition, because like I was saying earlier, for myself, like when I go to the gym, or not even to the gym, when I just exercise and keep active, it goes a long way in terms of just helping with my mental well-being and making me feel good, and making me feel like I can actually tackle the day. What does Vitality do in order to improve physical health, and why is this so important to our well-being?
Yeah, so physical activity keeps coming up. It's such an important part. What we see in research is that regular physical activity is associated with a greater sense of well-being, as well as lower rates of depression and anxiety across all age groups. Vitality generally has been and continues to be very invested in improving physical health and physical activity, and thereby, also the mental health of our members. So we use sort of varied reward mechanisms to encourage our members to increase their physical activity. So this includes, incentives, as well as enabling easier access to gym, doing fitness assessments, running and cycling events, even physical activity communities like the Strava Team Vitality community, for example. All of that are just initiatives to try and get people to be more physically active. Another component to improved cardiovascular health, but also improved mental well-being, is a healthy diet. So what we know is that the human brain, it operates at a really high metabolic rate. And it uses a substantial proportion of what we eat to support its structure and to support its function. It's like the old adage, you are what you eat, essentially. And what we're seeing, and there's a lot of research happening in this space, but a lot of research that's showing us that there's an association between dietary quality as well as nutritional deficiencies and mental health. So what that research shows us is that a healthy dietary pattern, which is characterized by high intakes of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, sort of your healthy fats, which are like olive oil, low-fat dairy, as well as like oily fish, which are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, can be associated with decreased risk of depression. And Vitality, in terms of the Vitality program, we aim to sort of support this, a healthy diet generally for all our members. We do this through our healthy food catalog, our discounts on healthy food, our healthy food partnerships. We also have a healthy food studio, and there the goal is to help people learn about healthy ingredients, but also how do you cook it? How do you make it still taste tasty?
Yeah, because that's people's biggest problem as well, making it tasty.
No, that's exactly it, right? And a lot of the time people just kind of associate healthy diet with bad tasting diet, and it really doesn't have to be that way. It really can be a tasty diet, but it's just varied and sort of has more of these healthy ingredients generally.
And are there any other factors that can contribute to a sense of mental well-being?
Yeah, definitely. So, we've touched on a few, and I think the ones that maybe we haven't spoken so much about, but where there is a lot of compelling evidence that it's very supportive to our mental well-being, are things such as social relationships. They're really critical, and they really help us buffer against mental ill health. Other activities such as yoga and dance, as well as things like Tai Chi, can also be incorporated specifically because they kind of incorporate mental relaxation, fun, and social engagement. And I know that's a little bit difficult in a COVID world, in a virtual world where we're also all trying to stay safe. But what we can do there is still kind of interact with these sort of like services, especially socially, in a virtual environment. The other kind of aspects that have been shown to have really positive effects on our mental well-being are things such as volunteering, gratitude, as well as maintaining our interpersonal relationships, as well as our relationships with our communities and our greater sort of social environment. These are all kind of really important factors in social connectedness, and they help us to get a sense of meaning and life satisfaction. So, here at Vitality, we look to help support, through virtual sort of connections, whether that's Team Vitality on Strava, also through things like the Healthy Food Studio. All of this is sort of integral to the program, because really what we know and what we see is social connectedness is a really important part of mental well-being. And I think, to that point, it's maybe one of the areas that we've struggled with a lot in the last year, because we've had to be physically distant and still continue to need to be that. And what really emphasizes, especially during this time, is when it comes to social connectedness and that interpersonal relationships, we really have to put a lot of more active effort in the virtual environment, because I think previously it used to be quite passive. It used to just happen. You would just see people. But now it's a much more active process, phoning people, connecting with people, having video calls if possible. Really, that helps a lot, because I do think this is an area that we've all struggled with, I think, in the last year.
And especially like you spoke about how we need social relationships, and I know that's been quite difficult due to COVID-19, but what has been or will be the effect of COVID-19 on our well-being?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a significant effect. COVID-19, I don't want to sound a cliche. I know we've been hearing it a lot, but I mean, it's 2020 and the pandemic has been extremely stressful to many of us for many different reasons as well. And I think our mental well-being experiences throughout this pandemic have been quite varied. So a lot of people might be experiencing general anxiety or health-related anxiety. They might be experiencing stress or burnout. Or, what we see often is a lot of people are fatigued, whether that's COVID fatigued or whatever it is. There's a lot of fatigue. There's also, and I think we haven't given this enough attention, we're also constantly having to adjust to sort of new routines, new measures, new restrictions, new news, new information, and that can be very taxing because we constantly have to sort of remodel and readjust, and that can be quite difficult for us. Other people might be going through a lot of loneliness and isolation in this period. And on the other hand, especially if we live in homes where there's a lot of people, many people might be experiencing a lack of personal space and a lack of, having sort of their own sort of space and way to escape. And so what I've noticed, and I've interacted with a lot of people on this topic in the last year, is that there's a very varied response, and there's a lot of different emotions, and that can be expected. We've been through a pandemic, and no one person's experience is going to be the same as somebody else's, and no one person's emotions are going to be the same as somebody else's. And with the fatigue, sometimes it's hard sometimes to be empathetic or to realize that there's this difference in space, and it's so important to sort of just realize that the experience and the difficulties can be so varied and can be so difficult for so many people. I think the one thing I'd like to emphasize, though, is that really, if you aren't coping, if you're struggling, it's important to reach out for help, to try and get that assistance, to try and to talk to people you trust, because it is a difficult time, and there is support and there is help available. The other thing that maybe I want to talk about is and we've talked a little bit about this during this time, is that especially with COVID, so many things are out of our control, whether that's virus factors or, just societal factors. There's a lot that's happening that feels like it's happening to us. And I acknowledge that and accept that. And, the one thing that I would just say that's really important is that we need to, when we can, to try and refocus on all of the domains that are still in our control. And some of the kind of day-to-day strategies that I think that I found helpful over the last year and a bit, and we've touched on some of these, but the one thing that I think really helps is to try and maintain a daily routine as much as possible. As humans, we like routine, we like consistency, especially in an inconsistent world. If we can have consistency in our little worlds, it makes a huge difference. What that means is, trying to wake up at the same time, showering or exercising or putting on your clothes, having breakfast, keeping that routine can really help just bring structure into a very unstructured world at the moment. The other sort of tips are to reduce the time you and your family spend watching or listening to the news. It's important to stay informed, and what you can do there is to set out a time or a period where you will engage with the news, you'll stay up to date, you'll read what you need to read. But then outside of that time, try and avoid it as much as possible. Try and focus on your other activities and wait for that time maybe where you engage with the news again. And this goes for social media as well. A lot of our social media, we can't mute sort of keywords or even key accounts that may trigger us in some way. And if you're going through a difficult time, it's okay to temporarily even mute that and know that at a later stage when you're feeling a little bit better, you can unmute, right? The other thing which we've already touched on is to make it a part of your daily routine to try and reach out to friends and family. Having that sense of connection, that interpersonal connection, and even a sense of community is really essential. It can help foster hope and it can help us feel not so isolated. And then, we touched on this as well. Again, practice relaxation, practice mindfulness, try and focus on what's in our control, on the present. All of this can kind of help us a little bit, especially when there's so much going on in our external environment.
And do the methods of supporting mental well-being work for everyone, or is it a case-by-case basis?
Yeah, so mental well-being, as mentioned, is an integral part of our lives. And what we can see from research, and everything, as I mentioned, is evidence-based. So we look at the research and we see what does help and what is supportive and where are the positive associations. And those are the things like physical activity and healthy nutrition and mindfulness and good sleep. And we know that. And many people get great value from the techniques and all the activities we've discussed. However, different aspects may work better for different individuals, right? So you might relate to a different kind of technique better than somebody else does. And it's really worth it to try it out and see what works for you as well. Research has shown us that improved mental and physical health can help us live more fulfilled and happier lives. At Vitality, we really understand the importance of mental well-being, and we look to try and support all our members in increasing their mental well-being and achieving their overall health goals. And to extend that, with Vitality at Home, we really want to try and help as many people and teach as many people more about, mental health and mental well-being, because it's such an important aspect. And yes, there's a lot to it and there are a lot of components, but it's really worth it to invest in your mental health, because it really does have an impact on your overall health and your overall well-being.
Now, I think for me personally, this conversation was very insightful, because most of the things that you mentioned are a lot about creating new habits, healthier habits, in order to help with your mental well-being. I mean, a lot of us don't really prioritize. In terms of my sleep, I'm very bad at that. And in terms of physical activity and good nutrition, those are things that we often overlook, but we don't realize what it does for overall well-being, not just our mental well-being, but overall well-being. And I think it's quite important, especially where mental health is concerned, to start practicing these new habits in order to be able to help ourselves. I know there are a lot of issues of affordability and accessibility, especially to mental health practitioners. So these tips really do help in terms of just getting us the help that we need from the comfort of our own homes, especially during COVID-19. So thank you so much for guiding us through this and teaching us so much, because I think a lot of things that you said are things that we are aware of, but we're not really aware of. So it just brings us back to self, and being cognizant of our internal and external factors that can contribute to our mental well-being. So thank you so much, Dr. Seranne.
Thank you so much, Shiru, and thanks so much for having this platform and giving me the chance to speak. And yeah, I think just to emphasize what you're saying, there's a lot that we can do, and hopefully, we can continue doing to help enhance our mental well-being and to help, just help support ourselves. But yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity, and very, very happy to be here.
And I just wanted to ask again, so the resources that you mentioned throughout today were Vitality at Home and even SADC for some help as well, yes?
Yes. So maybe just to go through them again. So you can find some of the resources that I spoke about on the Vitality at Home webpage. So you can just search for the Vitality at Home webpage. There you'll see links to physical activity, nutrition, mental well-being, and other resources. And there's a lot of resources and articles in that space, so you can really learn a lot more. Some of the the mental well-being assessments, as well as the mental well-being module, is currently live and available to all Vitality members. The other sort of really important link is SADC, which is the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, and they have a lot of resources that everyone can access as well. So yeah, that's just like a quick summary, but really go check out the Vitality at Home page. You'll be a lot of a summary of all of these resources and a lot of what we've spoken about today.
Yes, thank you so much. So to those that actually caught the conversation late, you can go to the Vitality at Home page, and then you can also visit SADC for other resources. So thank you so much for coming through today. Thank you so much, Dr. Seranne, for such a wonderful conversation. I look forward to speaking to you again. And thank you so much to everyone that watched today. Have a lovely Monday evening and good night.
Thank you.